So here's the story. Humanity's at a crossroads with their environment. And all sorts of unresolved social issues are distracting us from the work at hand. We live here on one of the frontiers of ecological collapse. Our region lacks sufficient long-term access to fresh water. On one level, we're extracting a disproportionate amount for national economic activity while local and future needs are left unmet. The region is host to a number of ecological crises, the least of which is the contamination of the lake, Rio Santiago. Rio Santiago drains the entire region of the wastewater from here down to the sea. We are documenting a widespread extinction event, not unlike the ones that Colbert documented in her book, The Sixth Extinction. The pathway forwards appear to be as complicated, social and economic systems entwined in local relationships and long, ugly histories without end. And here around the lake, there are communities where high percentages of the children are sick, and parents and relatives tell us about horrible deformities and developmental disabilities. Teams of researchers have flooded the region, and they've taken all kinds of evidence pointing to probable causes of uncontrolled garbage burning, indiscriminate pesticide use, a poor diet, and eventually, the water. The elders, the teachers, the public servants who have lived alongside these communities for generations tell us that this has come about alongside the contamination and deterioration of their environment. For several thousand years, communities have lived alongside the lake in relative harmony with their lake, using it as a source of life, as food, as recreation, spiritual awakening. But today, the children swim in filthy soup. Scientists disagree about how contaminated the lake is. There are those who show us the mercury levels here and there. In general, are okay, but there's some hot spots. There's others that look at PCBs or pesticides or lead, and they say the same thing, generally okay, but there's some hot spots. Then there's those who look at the biotic contamination of the lake. The eutrophic, hypoxic, full of human waste, high counts of giardia, high counts of salmonella. And of course, our new friends, the effervescent green cyanobacterias. The local news tells us bacterial levels might be within the Mexican standards, might be within the American standards. The problem is they fail to note that it's not just E. coli, but a whole host of parameters that aren't even regulated that we're worried about. So it's not safer than you think. The lake's not a whole lot safer than you think. It's a whole lot more dangerous than you think. We know that the researchers are right. The children are sick because of their poor diet, their exposure to chemicals, the poor habits their communities have burning garbage. But we also know that salmonella, cyanobacteria, heavy metals, pesticides are all linked to kidney failures and kidney problems. This should be a no-brainer. Since the times of the greatest empires, we've known that humanity needs clean water, not contaminated water, not questionably clean water. This is an old lesson, and yet we've abandoned the wisdom ways and march on into modernity, living well beyond the limits. This is what's meant by the concept of the war for water. It's a war between the sectors. The needs of the economy to grow versus the needs of people. It really is that simple, and it really is that complicated. About 15 years ago, I was working as an investigator in this region, beginning to study the problem, and we took the stories of the villagers, the elders, about how it used to be, about how it changed. Like the bigger story, we found that this problem, and the problem with extreme water contamination in general, is accelerating in nature. This means that the problem is growing, and this means the solution that we imagine needs to be able to grow as well. Let's say that again. The problem is accelerating, and time is a factor. Every 20 years, global production, consumption, and waste generation doubles every 17 to 20 years. That means in 1950, we were at X. In 1970, we were at 2X. 1990, we got to 4X. 2010, 8x. We're now moving into 16x. And in the next decades, we're going to go 32 times the global production of 1950. Consumption and waste production. While there are let that sink in. There are two dramatic directions that reactionary forces have taken in this theme, and neither one of them considers the factor of time. The first team are the reformers. They want the government to do their job. They want democracy. They want new leaders, new initiatives, new reforms, new laws. They want democracy that works and one that represents everyone, the vulnerable and the ecosystem. The second group, which in fact overlaps significantly with the first group, they say we can't have clean water until we end greed and capitalism as we know it. Similarly to the regulatory school, we first have to address the root causes of the problem. And what they say makes sense. How can we clean the lake? How can we clean the river if we don't stop the industries and the cities from indiscriminately dumping in it? Yet again, the problem in our region has been called the Chernobyl of Western Mexico, and it's accelerating in the wrong direction. Time is an essential factor. The contamination is here, and the solutions are decades, if not centuries, away. It almost appears as if there's no way out. And to make it more complicated, what we find on the extreme front edge of the contamination, where new projects are being planned and eminent domain is taking sensitive ecosystems and zoning them for heavy industry, is that it's being accompanied by force, violence, and ultimately silence. About 15 years ago, we began meeting in the evenings and discussing and studying the problem. We were startled by community members' response to the contamination, passively waiting for the government to reconcile it. We were also startled by the government's response. Abandoned wastewater treatment plants actually concentrate wastewater and create toxic point discharges equally as bad as the illegal discharges that we accuse the industry of. But what I couldn't wrap around my head around was civic inaction, right? Here we are in Mexico. Everywhere up and down the river, people say the same song. The loss of the ecosystems, the loss of the lake, the loss of the river, the loss of the frogs and the turtles and the fish and the ducks and the wonderful natural world that they lost. But these are amazing people. Why couldn't these people who make incredible things out of the earth, out of the plants, out of few resources, right? The Mexican way is to make do with limited resources. It's kind of a southern way in the US or a Mexican way here. Why couldn't these people, these builders, these growers, these menders, these workers, why couldn't they come together and try something? That's the government's problem. Anthropologist Monique Nuchin tells us that the Mexican government is a special perpetual hope-generating machine. The next guy, the next gal, the next administration for sure is going to solve it. So somewhere in this story, I got a master's and a PhD in access to water. But around 2012, a professor here in Ajijic, Dr. Norman Long, who was here for a few years, sent me an article looking at the way the Danish developed their windmill industry. And prior to the 1960s, the industry was non-existent. And they did this in a fascinating way, not a top-down approach at all. No, the Danish did this not by engaging with large industries and universities and engineers, but instead they went about bringing the knowledge of the conversion of wind into electricity into the communities. And the program worked through the rural folk school model, where farmers and youth were taught cutting-edge science about wind and electricity. The key was through massive participation with thousands of amateur windmill enthusiasts, the Danish were able to innovate at a scale much more rapidly than a top-down approach would allow. The Danish grew from a small farm-scale projects to community energy generation to today, where the average windmill powers 500 houses and some power tens of thousands of houses. So in 2013 and 2014, we began an experiment. What would happen if we bring water education to communities facing water contamination? In our first community in Ponsidland, when we launched a pilot class to see if there was community interest, dozens of community members came out. And for a while, we just met and learned about water. Local researchers donated their time and would give a class, and soon we were invited to another community, and then another and another. Today, we're in 12 communities along the river, and several outside of the region, several alongside the lake. And we try to inspire local action for simple, low-tech, low-cost solutions in the water sector. Our idea is that the solutions we build today will be improved, and that with this experience and with continued education and networking, we can innovate in this sector. And despite the socio-political complexities, move forward when other solutions appear to be blocked. We do not profess a solution, but we have identified a possible process. First, while we were interested in the river and the lake, we found quickly that in the communities, people were worried about their drinking water. So we began making drinking water filters with community members using barrels and sacks of sand that we mined from the canyons north of the city and then improved them with activated charcoals and zeolites. We did this without a budget. We did it with just the labor of the community members worried about their own water, worried about their community members. Keep in mind that all these communities lack safe drinking water. Groundwater is significantly contaminated in this region. This solution kept growing, and after we installed dozens of these filters in community centers, houses, schools, community groups decided they would like to seek out larger scale solutions. And one interesting experiment that we've done, that we now have 8 small community-owned water purifying businesses throughout the region. But then we began to return our focus to the lake and the river. In some of our communities, community members decided to reduce their own contribution to the waste stream. In surveys that we do, we find that residents use about 1 kilo of detergent per person per week per household. Fantastically clean here, I don't know if you've noticed. Since about half of that, and now there's some movements to reduce the phosphorus in detergents, but until recently, half of the phosphorus in detergents was phosphorus. I'm sorry, half of the detergent was phosphorus. In just a community of 500 people, they're dumping 200 kilos of phosphorus in the river per week. In other communities, and here's where we're making progress, communities have decided to build large-scale, but still small, nature-based water sanitation systems that work. Today, we're constructing our second large wetland system, and this one in Ojo de Agua, with the financing and impetus and hearts and hard work of the Chapala Sunrise Rotary Club. And we have funding to build more in the region. The project has also led to the creation of several reverse filtration systems that are used by farmers to treat the contaminated river water before they use it on their crops. One of the sad facts about contamination of the river and this lake is that thousands of farmer families continue to use this water for their crops. In all of these cases, these simple solutions do not represent a solution for this area. They are simply important first steps for regional residents to learn about simple solutions, to try them, to evaluate them, to learn from them and improve them for the next time. So that someday, perhaps if we can accelerate this movement, we can build simple systems that can handle the bigger challenges of our region. So while these little actions are almost useless compared to the scale and the scope of the problem, they're also steps forward towards the new world we're bravely looking for. I always say that if we really understand the complexity of the problem, it tells us there is no hope. But it's precisely this that motivates us to action. Knowing all the time that it's probably not going to work, it's probably not enough, it's doomed to failure, but we know the way forward has to be trying new things and going into the unknown, towards innovation, despite the odds. So take a moment and share with me this vision for our region. Let's take the frontier of this ecological destruction that we've all been warned about for decades, and we treat it like a laboratory for innovation. and we engage with thousands of citizen scientists, present and future, in order to restore it and bring it back to life. It is time now to invite new voices and new alliances in order to promote the local way forward. And it is time to invite new voices and new alliances. There are many challenges, including the mistrust and vulnerability that most people in these communities are mired in. But there are also so many people looking for a way forward for their communities and for their children. Dr. Long and Dr. Magdalena Villarreal published an article years ago looking at the agency of individuals and groups to change the world. Frequently, the resolution of a crisis involves inviting new voices and new perspectives to the table where decisions are being made. In 2023, students who worked along with my co-director Carlos Rocky renamed our project Rios Vivos, Living Rivers. After 10 years, we also realized that if this idea is going to work, we better do a better job reaching and teaching children. Our project today has become a refuge for some of the greatest talent in organizers, teachers, water specialists, construction teams, farmers, homemaker participants, all of them desperate to take action and carrying this dream a little further for a better future for their region and for their children. In our classes, children learn about simple filtration systems and engage in contaminating a model well and then trying to clean it, which is impossible. Residents come and learn and teach and share with each other from their own experiences. We host community action and work days in which we unite communities with each other and with student labor power and with others to build filters or maintain these small experimental works. And as communities take charge of their own water resources, they feel empowered. A new world is possible.